In the rest of the news, on November 22nd of last year, 12-year-old Tamir Rice was shot and killed by a police officer at a playground near his home in Cleveland, Ohio. Although Rice was unarmed, he was playing with a toy gun, and the cop who killed him apparently mistook it for a real one. Within seconds of arriving at the scene after a neighbor called in a young man sitting on a swing waving around a gun, that cop opened fire. Rice died the next day, but the officer who killed him has still not been charged. Now, 6 months later, a new day is dawning in Cleveland. On Tuesday, the city's police department agreed to put into place a series of new restrictions on the use of force by its officers. That move comes after a Justice Department report that slammed the Cleveland police for its pattern of violating the Fourth Amendment, their words. Under the new restrictions, Cleveland police won't be allowed to use force against people who do nothing more than talk back. They also won't be able to use it to retaliate against people who run away, and will no longer be allowed to fire warning shots or pistol whip people. Gee, they're going to stop that. And in what's probably the most controversial move, Cleveland police from now on will have to record and report every time they pull their gun out of the holster. As part of the move toward greater accountability, the Cleveland police have also agreed to an overhaul of their internal affairs unit. The city of Cleveland, meanwhile, will create a civilian panel aimed at coming up with other ways to reduce police violence. But for all the good that's likely to come out of these moves, some, including the family of Tamir Rice, don't think they go far enough. Joining me now to help explain why is Benjamin Crump, attorney for Tamir Rice's family and incoming president of the National Bar Association. Also joining me, Gianna Caldwell, federal lobbyist at Caldwell Strategic Consulting. Benjamin, Gianna, it's great to have you both with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, I should mention you also represented Michael Brown's family and Trayvon Martin's family.
Eric Gardner.
And Eric Garner as well? Okay. Benjamin, what's your response to the Rice family announcement?
Well, certainly, Tom, the Rice family, like most of the community, they're listening about this consent decree, and they want to know if it's just words on paper or really is the spirit of this consent decree going to become reality. And we'll know pretty soon here, Tom, because they have to make a decision what they're going to do with this officer who shot this 12-year-old child, you know, before they answered our lawsuit by saying it was Tamir's fault for his death because he should have been more cautious. Right. And then they said, in answering the public outcry, well, we told him 3 times to put his hands up and drop the weapon, but then the surveillance video comes out and you say, that's impossible. So they have an opportunity to tell the truth, say we made the mistakes, and that Tamir Rice should be turning 13 years old on June 25th instead of laying in the ground.
Tough one. Gianna, what was your reaction to Tuesday's announcement?
Well,
and do you think these new restrictions go far enough?
You know what, as a federal lobbyist, you gotta think when, and me being a guy that came up on the south side of Chicago where normally you saw police brutality happen, and it was with individuals that were involved in gang activity, they might have had weapons or whatever, so people didn't give that much of a concern as a Tamir Rice, I mean a young kid. So when I hear about things like this that happen, you know that a consent decree, especially considering the fact that this is the second one that they have in Cleveland, it isn't the solution in whole. So Attorney Benjamin Crump and I have been talking to build a bipartisan group of folks, Democrats and Republicans, to put together some real police reforms that can prevent things like this from happening.
For
and
example?
I think that's what is grand jury reform. Yeah. That's one of the areas. Police brutality reform. We have to figure out ways to police better, train better. And I don't think the consent decree goes far enough to do that.
Attorney Crump?
Well, I want to believe that really it is about the stakeholders in that community. A consent decree, like any law or legislation, is only as good as the writing on the paper unless you make it real. And when I say make it real, Tom, Gianna and I was talking a lot about this. You need real consequences for real life occurrences. These are real-life fatalities. We are losing people in our community at the hands of the people who are supposed to protect and serve them. And unless somebody is held accountable, unless people go to jail, what is the deterrent? Yeah. What is to stop people from doing it again? When are we going to stop the sanctioning of killing of unarmed people of color by the very people who are supposed to protect and serve them?
It has been, Ben Crump, it's been 7 months roughly since Tamir Rice was killed. What is the legal status of the case right now, both the criminal investigation and any civil action that y'all may be involved with?
Right, Mr. Hartmann, right now it is unexplainable why this investigation is taking so long. You know, we have the entire matter captured on surveillance video. And so, other than what people in the community are saying, they're trying to sweep his death under the rug. They're hoping people forget. That's the only thing that we can imagine is taking so long. The sheriff is hopefully finishing up his investigation. Then he will turn it over to the prosecutor, who has said he will present it to a grand jury to see if they're going to indict the officer.
Was it a sheriff's officer who killed Tamir Rice, or is the sheriff investigating the city police?
The sheriff is investigating the city police.
Oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Is that a good thing?
Well, I want to believe it is, but you know, the problem I had with Michael Brown and Eric Gardner, you have this symbiotic relationship between prosecutors and law enforcement locally there. They work together every day. So it's very hard to look at the person who you've relied on all the other cases to get convictions, and you had to build up their credibility. Now you got to impugn their credibility. You got to attack their credibility. So it seems a very difficult thing to do. And then after this, to go back and work with that same police force.
For the rest of your career.
For the rest of your career. A lot of people say it's political suicide if you're a prosecutor to then charge and convict the police. So there lies the problem, Tom. Unless we have grand jury reform, unless we really get independent people looking at this, then we're going to continue to get the same results.
So Gianna, would the way that it would look, you're talking about grand jury reform, right now grand juries get impaneled for fairly long periods of time. They look at multiple cases. They get to know the cops. They get to know the prosecutor. They eat lunch together. They hang out.
Right.
The cops, the police are the principal sources of testimony and information. They're trusted figures.
Right.
Would an alternative be to create grand juries that specifically do nothing but investigate police malfeasance?
Well, the Washington Post released a poll back in December which showed that 86% of Americans believe that body cameras was a great idea. Right. In addition to that, within that same poll, it said that 87% of Americans believe that it would be good to have an independent prosecutor investigate cases of police shooting of unarmed civilians. So with that being said, in terms of that grand jury piece, if you can get an independent prosecutor to investigate this, you don't have the same scenario where Attorney Crump just asserted that the prosecutor is eating, kind of hanging out, drinking with, and becoming friends with the person that they're going to investigate.
So you're saying that the grand jury members might be more impartial because literally their fate and future, their ability to earn an income, their livelihood does not depend on the police, whereas the livelihood of the prosecutor does. Is that
exactly? And you have to have that relationship there in a lot of cases, and people don't want to impugn their friends, if you will. They don't want to put themselves in that kind of situation. So,
Ben, do you think that, you know, we talked about this a little bit on the radio today. It seems that technology, the ubiquitousness of cell phone cameras, they talk about disruptive technologies, you know, like Uber and things, that this is actually a disruptive technology. It's changing society. And in large part, what it's doing is it's waking white folks up to what black folks have been going through for centuries, but, you know, in the more modern era, certainly generations. You think that's the case?
Absolutely, Mr. Hartman. I think with the advent of technology, the fact that you have these cell phones, I was just about to comment on the Mike Brown law that we need video cameras, because when you see it, then it's easier to believe. When we saw what happened in Charleston, South Carolina, where the officer, you know, shot him as he was running away, and until that video came out, the narrative was the standard narrative that I was in fear of my life. I had to shoot the unarmed person of color. Even though he had 4 bullets to his back, America was ready to accept that. But now, with every video surveillance that contradicts what their narrative is, it's starting to make people, black and white in America, say, we can't just take the police word as the gospel. Maybe these people in these communities have been telling us the truth, that they've been being victimized by the people who are supposed to protect and serve them. And so we got a lot of work to do together as a community.
Yeah, what we're starting to see now, though, is a sea change in the broader American culture, the media culture, and white culture, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
And it seems like a good thing. Gianna?
And no one's saying that, you know, all police are bad. And I think when you talk about police reform, some people get the idea, they go on television shows and say, hey, they want to change things. They think all police are bad. That's not the case at all. There's some very good police officers that do great work, and they should get those accolades. However, there are some folks who take advantage of the job, and they do things that they shouldn't do. And those folks, whether they be black, white, or indifferent, they should be held accountable.
Well, and you know, where are the good cops? I mean, this is the same problem that the prosecutors have. Yeah, there may be good cops out there, and they have seen their fellow officers do bad things, and they don't say a thing because they know that that their backs won't be covered, that they literally could lose their lives, that they'll be punished, that they'll lose their jobs. I mean, we got to fundamentally change police culture in this country.
Well, and it's everything. There are bad police officers, there are bad doctors, you know, there are bad Catholic priests who do bad things. What we really have to remember, people are human.
Yeah.
And we as human beings, we want our police to live up to the badge and the creed, and when you see bad stuff happen, you want people to report it. Because I agree with you, when people say, but there are more good cops than bad, I don't doubt that, but why aren't the good cops speaking up when they see things happen? That's all we're saying.
Well, that's a perfect metaphor because, you know, 40 years ago, doctors were covering up for each other like there was no tomorrow. 20 years ago, Catholic priests were covering up for each other like there's no tomorrow. Cops are doing it now, and it's starting to bust open. I think we're seeing some really consequential changes here. Are you guys optimistic?
From your mouth to God's ears, we're seeing consequential changes, and what I want to see is people in our community need to say that the system is fair. If they do bad, they're held accountable. If we do bad, we're held accountable. We all want the rules to be even and fair. This is America, and it's supposed to be equal justice for all.
Yeah. Benjamin Crump, Gianna Caldwell, great to have you both with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so
Mr.
much.
Hartmann.
Great to see you.
You too.
Thank you.